Hi guys, John Florez again, and boy, this is going to be kind of fun. I know I told you I didn't have any more stories left, but once I sat down and thought about it, yeah, there's some more things I can share. So I wrote them down. I'm going to have to refer to them as we go, but bear with me, this could be really fun. The beginning isn't as much fun, it's just kind of a piece of trivia, and that's back in the late 60s. When staff producers pretty much ruled, independent producers were not as common. And so if you wanted, as an aspiring artist, to get a label deal, some of us were naive enough to, like I did, hop a plane, ditch Class A issue, go to New York City, walk into the front doors of major labels and present my work, the masters I was doing here in Phoenix. And I did the same thing in LA. I actually walked into Jerry Fuller, my hero's office. He produced Gary Puckett and the Union Gap and all kinds of other artists, and he's who I wanted to be. And I could actually walk in, he didn't know me from anything, and the receptionist would send me back, and Jerry would spend some time and say, "Oh, what'd you produce, John?" And I showed him and said, "Okay, keep trying, keep going, sounding good." Well, see, that all changed. And eventually you could not get in to see, if you were an aspiring artist, an A&R guy at a record label, unless somebody within the industry, a proven contact, had called in and referred you. How ridiculous is that? Well, back to my point of being able to walk into record labels' offices and introduce yourself cold and still get an appointment with a producer. That happened to a young guy, a young musician, singer-songwriter from the Northwest. And he had a group called the Midday Rain. He drove night and day from the Northwest down to LA, walked in the door and said, "I'd like an appointment with a producer." I said, "Well, sir, we have a new rule that we're just implementing where you can't just walk in and get an appointment, you need to be referred." I happened to be standing in the lobby when the receptionist said this, and I said, "Well, this time we're going to break the rule. Come on, you come back with me," I said to the young man. "Let's see what you got." And he played me his material. I signed him. He got a single deal with us, and that's the way it worked in the old days. Music prevailed, not bureaucracy. Music. So here's just a tiny excerpt of that young man's group, the Midday Rain, singing "Welcome to the Rain." Here you go. He was a walk-in. Here you go.
She's gonna love for good. She won't be back, though she should. You know it's sad, she let you down. Now she brings her love to him. After all the time it's been, welcome to the rain. Welcome to the rain.
In 1970, as I was getting ready to leave RCA, having been really upset by losing the Friends of Distinction and Willie Hutch not being promoted by RCA, I signed a group called Green Light Sunday. They were out of the Midwest, had a fabulous, fabulous lead singer, Susan Darby. And I really liked the group. They were almost jazz, folk, rock. They were just a very interesting act, and I really, really liked them. So I signed them to the label, knowing full well that I would be leaving almost immediately. So if you were to Google Green Light Sunday, you would come upon an article written by the founder of the group, I believe, and his disdain for me because I left them there at RCA and didn't produce them and didn't communicate well, that I was just signing them and going. Now he's right, I didn't. I should have. But I got him a record deal, and I didn't just get him a singles deal like the previous guy from Midday Rain that you just heard. No, I got them an album deal, and they got a fold-out cover and the whole bit, and everything was set up for them, but I was moving on, and I already had 5 flights up ready to go. So I left Greenlight Sunday in the very capable hands of the people who were running the group at the time. And they produced the loveliest cut that Susan Darby sang lead on. It was a Laura Nyro tune called Emmy or Emily. So I want to play you a tiny bit of the cut I didn't produce, but the act I did sign to RCA, Greenlight Sunday, featuring Susan Darby. And just listen to a bit of her performance. It's lovely, and then I'll tell you more about her in a moment. Here you go. Wow, she takes my breath away. So when Greenlight Sunday's album wasn't selling at RCA, Susan contacted me and said, would you consider trying to get me a solo deal with a label? And I said, well, I'm really not very good at that, which I never was, getting artist deals. But I do have a friend, Steve Bender, who's been the president of Talent Associates Records that I was working for prior to this. And Steve has some contacts, so let me play your Laura Nyro cut for Steve and see what he thinks. So the next thing I know is that Steve has gotten Susan Darby a singles deal with whatever label Artie Mogul was at the time, a wheeler-dealer music business guy. Probably United Artists, that would be my guess. That's where Artie probably was at the time. So I was given a budget for 4 sides. Susan would come in from Akron, Ohio, stay with Carol and me at our home in Tarzana. The fun piece of trivia with that was she had a roommate at the time at our house, Linda Carter, soon to be Wonder Woman. I was trying to get Linda a deal at Bell Records, so Susan Darby and Linda Carter were roommates briefly at Carol's and my home in Tarzana. I made the error of putting Susan Darby into kind of catchy rock and roll leaning tracks, pop rock leaning tracks, because I could never make a legitimate rock and roll record if my life depended on it. So anyway, I know it was a Lambert and Potter tune called Going Down, and all I remember is having Susan sing, got to get you back again, all the love and track again, baby, don't you know what you do? Produced those cuts for Steve Bender, for Artie Mogul, and Artie hated them and sent Susan Darby back to Ohio, packing up, going back to Ohio and starting over again. Kind of broke my heart, but I consider that to be my fault because we showed him Emily, we should have given him something like that. The label wanted to hear that, not what I delivered. So just cutting back briefly in time, just for grins. People would come into RCA and they would say, listen to my record. And we're talking at the time, this was the segue between the 50s of Neil Sedaka and all the cute, catchy, jingle-esque 60s songs to Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and Iron Butterfly and everybody else you can think of. The trend was changing, and the trend was going to what Warner Brothers would make a living at. But at the time, RCA, A&M, Capitol, all of us considered to be the major labels at that time, we were all pretty straight, white, pop 60s guys. And artists would come into my office and say, why don't you want to sign something like this? And I said, because it's not what I do. He said, well, is there anybody here that does do this? And I'd say, no, as close as you got is Rick Gerard back when he did the Jefferson Airplane before they became the Starship. But no, he's not doing that anymore, so no, and there's nobody back in New York to send you to either. So those were the days where RCA, Capitol, A&M, and not Columbia were falling by the wayside in terms of not really getting hip enough soon enough and joining in on the new trend of a new style of rock. Okay, we weren't there. Columbia was under Clive's direction, and Clive was right there. Clive was there, in my opinion, maybe a beat or two before Warner Brothers was, but those are the only two majors you could go to, and Warner Brothers wasn't quite the major player yet, but soon would be. And boy, once they became a major player, they became, in my opinion, by far the number one place, not only to hear great music, but to work. It would be my fantasy to work there, but my style of music just was not what they did. And they were way ahead of the times for me. I was still back in the previous decade. Okay, so this is going to end part one of the new stories because I'm wearing down a little. I still have the black mold infection and the other stuff that I'm fighting off, but I'm feeling a lot better, which you could probably see because I'm having fun with this. So this will be part one of the new stories episodes, and this will end with an interesting thought for you. Did you ever think that the people who apply to the major labels are potentially great artists? Well, yeah, but often the great artists came to the labels word of mouth through trusted friends who had already heard them and said, hey, you know, check these guys out. And that's the way most people, in my opinion, got their deals. Sometimes through the power contacts, you know, the people I've told you about that kind of ran the business, the clique, so to speak, CLIQUE. But, you know, often very, very word of mouth. The people who came in generally off the street or had the misfortune of mailing their music in really suffered grand abuse at our hands. Now, many of the label guys just took the mail-ins and threw them in the trash without listening. I, however, as a rookie, Joe Reisman assigned me the task of listening to everything that came into RCA through the mail. So, religiously, I did that. And you will not believe some of the smiles you'll get from some people who wanted to be stars, but I swear to goodness, if they made it, then I was horribly wrong, because I compiled a tape at the time that I called The Worst of the Street. And I don't mean the worst of the street, but I mean seriously now. These individuals wanted to be stars, and frankly, just this man's opinion, they had a little work to do before that was going to happen. So in order to show you this and maybe give you the smiles that these gave me, let me just play you some brief snippets. I'm not going to interrupt in between them. I'll just play them and you see what we got, and then that'll wrap it up for part one. Okay? Here you go. John's personal worst of the street. The people that walked in or mailed in and wanted to be stars. Here you go.
Just like the other times, you've thought you've lost me and left me behind, but that's something you don't know about me. 'Cause you see, I've had you right from the get-go. Right from the get-go. I've had you right from the get-go.
Bluebird of happiness, where is you at? Did you get swallowed by some fat cat? Is you is or is you ain't? I gotta know, 'cause bluebird of happiness, I need you so. Please, little bluebird.
This is take 11.
Hi. Hello, Michael. How you doing? How you doing, Michael? Is it loud enough? I saw her with her boyfriend at the root beer stand. Her boyfriend was a member of a local band. That dude wasn't cool. He dropped out of school, and now he's working full-time at the root beer stand. School, 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 I wanna go back. School, 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 I wanna go back. School, 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 I wanna go back. I wanna go back to school. I've gotta work it out so she'll be next to me in history and physics and ecology. And we'll have a ball in the same study hall. We'll do our nightly homework in the library.
And the service of the crown has an agent all around us. 007. Suave and sophisticated, James Bond is his name, and he really came to fame as Agent 007. Boom, 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 boom. In the land of Bongo Bongo, there's a cat they call White Pongo. As he strolls through the jungle, the earth begins to shake, just like a giant earthquake. The natives send a message on a drum, boom, 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 which means White Pongo's coming.
My mother taught me how to pray when life was dry and days were gray, when sorrow surged within my heart, and love and I were far apart. My mother taught me how to
Hey, Russian man, I think you're a lot like me. You think twice about the things you read, but they tell you to flash your swords and shake your thunder, or you may be torn asunder in one hopeless blunder, torn asunder in one hopeless blunder.
I got those garbage blues. I feel it way down in my shoes, 'cause there's just something taking the garbage out. Things will come and things will go. We know this to this day. The more that we accumulate, the more to throw away. I had a dream the other night, and I woke up from my sleep to find myself beneath the brand new garbage heap. To find